let's talk about, or let's actually look at a couple of taxonomies the several teams design. So you can stay there, Eloise, don't go away. So we're here looking at taxonomies and inviting team members. So I'm gonna call Ali. Ali, some of you met her before. We did a webinar a couple of weeks ago. There you go, that's Ali back. And Ali wants to share her approach when she's working with clients and helping other teams to build their taxonomies and especially the research repositories. So Ali, I know you have to go very quickly, so go for it. Share your screen and tell us how you think about taxonomies and how that thought process has helped you.
Excellent. Okay, so let me pull it up. I'm going to do, let's see. Can you see?
Not yet. You have to share your screen.
Oh, I have to push the share button.
Yes.
There we go. Now you can see?
Yes. You don't have to like make very big the... We're seeing your desktop and we're seeing also your browser. So you might want to, exactly. There you go.
That's a little better. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Sophia, for having me. And Eloise, that was so cool and so helpful. I learned so much. So as Sophia mentioned, I'm sharing my approach to taxonomy and how I set everything up when I work with clients. So I work primarily with software as a service companies, and over the course of several implementations of Enjoy HQ, I've started to notice a few things that are really important. So one of them is starting with, as Eloise mentioned, who needs what information, who's on first, how do we make sure everyone gets what they need as the starting point for any consideration. So that's why I start with building an access map and listing out who's going to be in which places. I use tags and labels as for some of the high level data. I know Eloise used the term tags a lot. In Enjoy HQ, we also have properties and values. So tags will be something, it's different for every team, but something that might be fixed, something that might be highly searchable. Maybe it's job type for jobs to be done research. Because I work with software as a service companies, again, we have pretty regular acquisition or revenue milestones, acquisition, activation, retention, or the line of business, if there's two different products, two different sides of the company. But the two things that I find myself using the most often are properties and values, building out a taxonomy that relates to how the product is used, the terms that people will be searching for across the company, and one where I'll look at different research questions that I have. So for software as a service, we may look at the property and say product area. This is pretty common for any type of research that you're going to do, a product manager, marketer. A lot of folks are going to want to come in and look at a different product area, and that differs from team to team. In some places, it might be security and onboarding. In other places, it might be I'm using a tool called Mural now. Maybe it's this whiteboard, maybe it's adding images, whatever it is for your team. And then going through different properties, and you can have as many values as you need. The cool thing that I use the most, that I really, really get a lot out of, especially with the analysis properties in Enjoy HQ, is to build a taxonomy based on a research question. And this really drives how I will start to go through a transcript or lots of different tickets and tags and set everything up so that we can start to analyze and see what types of patterns. So this will be, I think this is going to be a handout if you want it. You can use it as a jumping off point. I have developed a list of some questions that come up over and over again, pretty common research questions that I see across teams. And I start to say, all right, here's our research question. Here's how we're going to start tagging things here. And then to get one level deeper, sometimes we might say, okay, for example, if we take discovery habits, how do people search for us? Really helpful for marketers, doing acquisition and salespeople. How do we get in the places where our customers are? Maybe it's word of mouth. And as Eloise mentioned, it's my own research investigation. So I will start with the taxonomy and it will build. So maybe it starts with word of mouth and goes to a Google search, but then it will go to, oh, wait a minute, it's more specific to a colleague, or maybe it's their boss saying they need to use it, and build it from whatever seems to be happening. And the cool thing I like about this, especially here, this is my most commonly used question because I work with onboarding, or I help teams with onboarding. What do people say they want to do when they sign up? And sometimes I will have 40 or 50 different answers here. And that gives us a really cool way to quantify with a nice graph what are the different reasons people sign up, which can be a nice a nice way of showing some data that may be a little bit more nuanced that we might get if we asked a survey question with a finite set of options before we are ready. So I think that's it. Let's see, stop sharing the screen. Stop sharing screen. Does it work? Yeah, it works. Okay, great.
Thank you. So people are asking if you are going to be so kind and share that link. Can I share the link with everybody?
Definitely, yes. Yes. You can make a copy of it, the mural, if you have a mural account. Just don't put any sensitive information of yours in there because I use it a lot. So yeah, great. Brilliant.
So we will send that link right after you get the recording, and then we will send a separate email with the materials and that link. Thank you so much, Ali. You're amazing. It looks like we don't have any questions right now, so I'm going to try to get the next team act. So thank you, Ali. That was really, really useful. Bye. So who do we have here? Sam. Oops. I can't hear you, Sam. Can you guys hear me? Yes. Okay. Excellent. And are we going to have Mac as well?
I may, if anyone asks questions, I may have him jump in to help answer any of those since he helped me on all this. But
perfect. So let me share let me give you an intro very quickly. So we have here Samuel. He's a customer experience researcher at MX. It's a company in the fintech space, over 700 employees, more or less, I think. So you have a lot of complexity, a lot of different stakeholders, and you recently started using Enjoy to build your repository in the organization. So I would love you if you can share, your approach, how you thought about it, how you are evolving your taxonomy, and that's over to you. Go for it.
Great, thank you. Yeah. So, and what you just said there about our business being particularly weird to navigate because we're B2B, B2B, B2C, B2B, B2B, like there can be like many layers deep. And so it's made it kind of tricky and unique how we've had to approach all this. But we're to provide context, we're definitely in the early stages of figuring out what our taxonomy should be. And after like watching this presentation and the last presenter, right, Mac and I are already like, we've got a lot of work to do. We've we missed some things along the way. We've been making a lot of mistakes, but we're going to figure it out. So the first thing where I approached this is I used to work for a company called Domo. And while I was at Domo, I worked extensively with data scientists. And I learned through trial and error how to ruin everything, in the data set and not make it so you can use it later or in different contexts and join it with other data sets. And so one of the things I started to do immediately before or as I was setting up my taxonomy was trying to figure out what my unique keys were, right? All the metadata that I need to, yeah, thank you. So I needed to identify all the different types of data that I would need to import with all of the different data sets. Again, we were talking earlier about governance, and again, because of my background, I realized like you have to start with governance in mind. Like, how are we going to scale this? How are if this becomes a big research operation, let's stand up everything in a way where it's going to make it easy for really huge, big research projects later on where we're doing correlative analyses with quantitative data sets, right, that we want to join this with. So that's where I started with a lot of this. Hold on a second. So hold on. Lost my notes.
So this is the identification of the sources, right? So these are the sources of feedback and the different
yeah. So another thing that we did was to identify what constitutes rows of data, for clients, for users, for a feedback unit, for an insight, and trying to think about all that. And that helps me think through how I'm going to set up my tagging, right? And all of the columns dimensions that we need to bring in with each data set in order to, again, make it more analyzable later. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. The next thing that I should have done way easier, thanks to Lucas and and others at Enjoy HQ for answering a lot of my questions around this. But I should have started with all of this documentation before I started setting up my taxonomy. It changed a lot of the way I was organizing all of my tags and labels and categories that I was going to set up. So this is one thing that I'd recommend to everyone, if you haven't done yet, dive into the documentation, really try to understand Enjoy HQ's paradigm around this, right? And another thing I forgot to mention.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, sorry, is just in particular, try to really understand the difference between a tag versus a property, a value, and what you consider metadata versus what Enjoy HQ considers metadata. Like there's, and again, because of governance, and if you really want to make all those data sets really searchable later on and easy to compartmentalize, figuring out all that out ahead of time has been really helpful. We can go to the next slide. So the next thing we did was just go through and try to come up with all of our tags and properties. And these are ones that we're going to try out, but we're not, married to anything yet. We just wanted to sort of set up a platform, a bunch of labels that we could put in and have people start using to see if they work, right? Start with some sort of structure, but yeah. We set up some universal tags to create huge buckets. Some of the metadata properties that we're interested in is making sure we can easily find out who owns the data, which team owns the data in case that person leaves the company, the data collection method, how valuable is the data. If people want to make a judgment about like, well, this is kind of junk, but maybe there's something interesting in there, but we still want to have access to it. We want to be able to label that. The different audiences, the user types. Since we have so many different user types, we really need that, and document type and so on. And with other tag properties, we have products, obviously. And you can go to the next slide there. We have client plain points that we want to create tags for that are pretty common amongst clients, and we separated that from user pain point categories. There's overlap sometimes, but not necessarily. And so far we've come up with goal categories because we're interested in jobs to be done methodology, and for certain types of research we want to label goals. We're going to play around with emotion, see if we can start setting up some automated tags to identify emotions. And we're not there yet, but eventually we want to be able to set up segments and personas and statuses. So the last thing that we've been doing recently, if you want to move to the next slide, is we've just been trying it out. That's really what you got to get to next, is just start messing with stuff, bring in some data, start trying it out, see if the taxonomy works. And that's what Mac and I have started to engage in the last couple of weeks, is put a live project in there and see if this taxonomy is helpful, right? And that's what we've been doing.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Sam. That is wonderful. And I see it's a lot of challenges, right? Because you have a ton of different elements here, a lot of different labels, a lot of different tags. So how you go about it, simplifying it. And today we learned a lot of things about making things easier. So maybe there's a lot of points here that can be done later, right? You can just fold it in a little bucket called, someday we'll use that, I'm sure, but then just focus on less terms, because it's quite large, but it's an amazing job that you've been doing.
And that's what I really wanted to do, is just start with, like, if I could have, I always tried to start with, like, what do I want in 10 years? What's my ideal situation? What would it allow me the richest type of research? And I list it all out, and then you just start working towards it as you can, right?
Perfect. Oh, that's super helpful. I really appreciate it. Again, if we have any other questions, Sam, I will send them to you. And so Okay, cool. We're looking from Brandia. Stay with me, Sam, for a second while we look for the next theme, because this is all live and somehow improvised as well. So let's see. Have we found Brandia, Lucas? Yes. I'm gonna start some Taxopalooza dancing while we're waiting for Brandia to get technical.
There it is. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties.
You were gonna get me the like dancing, and people were going to run away.
I wanted to wait for that. That's why.
So, yeah, you're here with us. Thank you so much.
Yes.
So you're a product manager at Tally. Tally again is as well in the fintech, right? But consumer fintech, and you are part of a 130 people company. So no huge, but big enough to be complicated to create a taxonomy that actually serve a lot of stakeholders as well. I invited you to the webinar because when I saw your taxonomy, I was very excited the way you thought about it, and it feels very, very practical. And so I think everybody will learn a ton from it. And I know that you are in the early, and you will be developing this and so on, but it would be great if you could take us through what you have done so far.
Sounds good. I will kick it off. So yeah, as Sophia mentioned, I am a product manager at Tally, and just a bit of background on Tally besides the fact that it's a fintech app. So we are a credit card payoff tool. So basically you add your cards to Tally, and if you're eligible, we'll give you a lower interest line of credit that we use to automatically pay your credit cards for you. So in that way, you only have one monthly bill that you need to pay. And we also provide recommendations on how you should contribute to your credit cards based on your goals and your preferences. Next slide. So I am very, very privileged to be at a company that I believe is very customer centric. That means, however, that there are a lot of different functions and organizations across the company that are interested in customer feedback. So we have a lot of people that want to be involved with the Enjoy HQ tool. Next slide. Fortunately, however, we have been able to narrow it down to 4 specific functions that are actually collaborators within the Enjoy HQ tool. So these were the customers, so to speak, that we focused on when creating our Enjoy HQ taxonomy. So user success, research, design, and product. Next slide. So something that we do as product managers at Tally is we start with, anytime we're creating a feature, we start with a problem statement. So we did the same thing for taxonomy. We started with a problem statement of how might we leverage tags, properties, and values in Enjoy HQ such that we can accomplish 2 jobs to be done. So basically, what are we trying to achieve with our taxonomy? So the first job to be done was that we wanted to enable research, product, and design to easily search for relevant data during product discovery. In other words, if I am a researcher and I'm creating a new research project, I want to be able to easily search for all of the relevant data that I want to collect for my project. The second job to be done was we wanted product and user success to be able to analyze feedback from leads and customers for prioritization and planning. So for example, if it's the beginning of the quarter and we want to identify what are the top things that we want to address from users in our roadmap for the next quarter, we'd be able to go into Enjoy HQ and perform that analysis to make that assessment. We also had one main constraint that we wanted to address for our taxonomy, which was we wanted our tags to be simple enough for our user success team to be able to leverage them in intercom conversations. So they're going to be using the exact same tags that we have in Enjoy HQ within intercom when they're replying to customers. Next slide. Cool. So here is our taxonomy, and Eloise will have to tell me how we did. But where we basically began when defining the taxonomy is asking the question of what are the primary needs that customers or interviewees talk about or ask about during support conversations and interviews and surveys. So we took a look at some of the conversations that we get through Intercom, some of the interviews that we've done in the past to identify these high-level tags. So we came up with 5, and the 5 are problems, so users having a problem, confusion, something about the product isn't clear, the user has a service request, the user wants to close their account, or the user has a specific feedback. So they have an opinion or insight to provide about something. And then we wanted to use properties and values to basically add more specificity to those tags or to those needs. Next slide. So here is the very simple version of our tags, properties, and values. These are all of the tags and properties that we use, 5 each. This isn't the holistic list of values, but it pretty much encompasses some of our primary values that we use at Tally. So as I mentioned, we have 5 tags, and then our properties are basically more specific needs that a user might have. So we have existing feature, new feature, existing service, external factor, and proposed feature. So as an example, if we have a support conversation or are conducting with an interview with a user and they say, I really like Tally, but I prefer Mint because it allows me to have more control and is less automated. Then we would tag that as feedback with the properties of external factor. They mentioned the competitor, property proposed feature. They mentioned they want control, and property of existing feature. They mentioned autopay and automation. So that allows us to really tag our conversations and raw data in a way that will allow us to leverage them for not only research and research projects going forward, but also for performing analysis for prioritization purposes. The other thing that I'll mention on this is that we were able to cross-validate this with a lot of the internal documentation that we have. So some examples of things that we used were, firstly, onboarding training decks for product and engineering org structure. So we were able to identify, okay, what are all of the different areas or features or services that we have across the company and across the product. So we were able to validate it with that. And then finally, if you go to the last slide, Sophia, so here's how we decided to roll this out. So the first thing that we did was to do a review with stakeholders. So our main stakeholders that I mentioned, the main functions, making sure that the taxonomy was feasible and valuable to them. We also did a test run. So we looked at a single project within Enjoy HQ and applied the taxonomy to all of the raw data within that project across multiple sources to make sure that it made sense. Then we also created a guide, so basically documentation for our collaborators to use and leverage going forward. And the expectation with that guide is that they'll be able to help us iterate on it. So we're continuing to solicit feedback from our collaborators on suggestions for improvements that we can make to the taxonomy. So that's where we're at right now, but that's the gist of our tag taxonomy.
Your question.
Yeah.
How do you manage it so simple? Because it's just so easy to create huge taxonomies and complicated. Eloise was talking about this, and I see a lot of taxonomies as well as part of my job, what I do. So always is that what I always see is just this pattern of being really, really complicated and having to go back and cut and cut and cut. Whereas you went, and the first time when you shared the taxonomy, I was like, wow, you got a lot of clarity. How did that happen?
So my recommendation would be to get to that place would be to start very high level and to think very holistically and comprehensively from the start. So thinking about your entire company, or at least, the people who are going to be using the tool, what are the things that they think about? What are the different product areas across the company? And just trying to categorize them in the most simplistic way. And so for us, because we were targeting how to categorize based on feedback, there's really only 5 types of things that people talk about. They have a problem, they have confusion, they have a feedback. And so I think it's just being able to start at a very high level like that and thinking comprehensively from the start.
That is super, super helpful.